Tonight, we step quietly into the Roman Empire, a world where power, economics, and people mixed into a system so casually brutal that even our worst workplaces seem merciful by comparison. So dim your lights, maybe let a soft hum fill the room, and settle in. Because if you've ever felt overwhelmed by modern job hunting, be thankful you weren't up for literal sale at the Roman slave market. In ancient Rome, your resume wasn't on parchment. It was hung around your neck like a price tag. Defects were included too: bites when angry, runs away, quotes Homer too much. Buyers examined teeth, poked muscles, checked scars, all while auctioneers called out bids in the bustling plazas of Rome, Delos, or Ephesus. Slaves came in all forms, from unskilled laborers to prized intellectuals. The cheapest were the basic workers: field hands, builders, miners. They cost the equivalent of a soldier's 2 years of wages. These were the people who tilled fields, carried loads, or swung hammers until their bodies gave out. The unlucky ones ended up in mines, where life expectancy was measured in months. Others worked in bakeries, farms, or construction, living short lives of exhaustion. Some could even be rented for the day, like a grim version of Uber. But not all slaves were destined for drudgery. With training, even a grain hauler could increase in value, learning to read receipts, mix concrete, or keep accounts. Talented slaves became status symbols. Educated Greeks, in particular, were the prize of Roman households: philosophers, doctors, musicians, mathematicians. A skilled slave might fetch the price of an estate, making them walking investments, admired for their brilliance while denied freedom. Some were so gifted they were paraded as symbols of culture, living ornaments to prove their master's sophistication. And then there was beauty. Rome valued it extravagantly. Attractive young men and women, especially from exotic regions, could cost more than farmland. Their role might be as attendants, cupbearers, or companions, carefully dressed and perfumed to dazzle guests. To own a strikingly beautiful slave was the Roman equivalent of driving a gleaming sports car through a crowded street, a bold, unapologetic display of wealth. No market was more notorious, though, than that of the gladiators. They were not just slaves, but stars. A successful fighter, muscular, scarred, and celebrated, could be worth a fortune. Lannister, the owners of gladiator schools, bought them like prized racehorses, trained them, and rented them out for games. Crowds adored them. Roman women etched their names on walls, children collected their images. Some gladiators became so famous they were the celebrities of their age, admired, lusted after, and yet utterly owned. Even female gladiators, rare but electrifying, carried extraordinary novelty value. Of course, with every fight, the investment risked bleeding out on the sand. Children, too, were sold. They were cheap, sometimes less than a good dinner party. Fragile, needing years of training, yet useful for errands, fanning, or simple household tasks. Some were born into slavery, the so-called verna, raised from birth to serve. Others were gifts, even playthings for wealthy Roman children, dressed and renamed like toys. At the darker edge, some were bought for purposes far more sinister, reminders of how little Roman law cared for innocence. Wars made the market swell. Every conquest delivered not only land, but human spoils. Captives from Gaul, Greece, Carthage, and beyond poured into Rome. After great battles, prices collapsed under the sheer flood of bodies. Captives could be bought in bulk, sometimes cheaper than a tunic. Plantation owners seized the chance, filling fields with cheap labor. But this bargain came with danger. These were soldiers, rebels, and survivors, and their resentment sometimes erupted into revolts like the Great Uprising of Spartacus. Rome lived with the constant tension that its economy rested on a captive population who might, at any moment, choose defiance. The value of a slave could hinge on 5 things: age, health, appearance, skills, and origin. Youth was prized, but not too young. Health was essential. An injured or ill slave was quickly discounted. Beauty raised the price, sometimes extravagantly. Skills, whether practical or intellectual, transformed value, and origin mattered. Greeks were revered as tutors and artists, Thracians as fighters, Syrians and Egyptians as exotic companions. Each origin carried stereotypes that Roman buyers indulged like collectors choosing wines. In this world, people became property. Some slaves lived relatively comfortable lives, trusted as secretaries, tutors, or even business managers. Others died nameless in mines, fields, or arenas. A few were freed by their masters, winning legal personhood through manumission. But for most, freedom was a distant dream. And so, the Roman slave market reminds us of the brutal paradox at the heart of that empire. Rome built aqueducts, philosophy, art, and law. But it also built its greatness on human suffering, buying and selling lives with the same cold calculation as cattle or grain. So, as you settle deeper into your chair, listening to the soft hum around you, remember, the Roman world was never just marble and glory. It was also chains, auctions, and human price tags. A society where brilliance, beauty, and even a beating heart could be measured, bargained for, and sold. Sleep well, knowing you've merely browsed the stalls of a market long closed, though its echoes, in many ways, still whisper through history.